Welcome to the Rockabye Revenue Podcast with me, Abby Watson. I'm a mum of 4 and a business strategist, and I train people to become hypnobirthing teachers. In the last decade, I've built a thriving baby business that grew beyond my wildest dreams. This podcast is for you if you run a business or dream of running a business in the birth and baby industry. You want to change lives whilst making more money. I'm talking about creating sustainable income whilst being present for the people that matter most. I believe for our baby businesses to have the impact we desire, we must be rewarded. On this podcast, expect me to share actionable strategies without the jargon. I've been where you are. I've built a business while raising 4 little ones, and now I'm here to help you turn your passion into profit while creating the life you've always dreamed of. So let's get started. Hello, lovely one. We are here for another episode of Rockabye Revenue. Now, we are talking today all about habits. The habits that I've adopted that have led to a really successful business. Now, worry not. I will put my hands up and say, when I see things like this on social media, what habits I've adopted to be a successful businesswoman, I never, ever, ever relate. And that's because usually they're talking about things like getting up at 5 a.m. before their children wake up, having an ice bath and, meditating on a mountain, goal setting while collecting fruit for their daily smoothie. And I'm sat there thinking, oh, can I just not get on with stuff? Can I not just take action? So believe me, this podcast is going to contain no habits that talk about getting up at the crack of dawn and jumping in ice baths. Now, if you love ice baths, I love that for you. I really do. Go for it. Quite frankly, if I jumped in an ice bath, I think I'd actually wee myself. That is not for me. I mean, it might be one day, but not right now. And no, I am not getting up an hour before my kids get up. I'm not. They get up far too early as it is. And yeah, our mornings are busy enough without me trying to shoehorn some work in. So no. And this is the thing, as much as I am going to talk about my 5 habits that have created success in my business, I really want to remind you that we are all individuals and we all have very different lives, So what I might be able to adopt as habits might be more difficult for you and vice versa. And ultimately, we're all in different seasons of our life. What I talk about as being habits now in my business, perhaps years ago, wouldn't have been the case. And that's why in this podcast, when I'm talking about habits, I'm not really talking about daytime routines, because actually they shift as if you're a parent, as your children grow, your children grow, your habits, your daily routines will change and evolve, and that's okay. What I'm talking more about are the ways of thinking, the things that we allow ourselves to do and not do, our boundaries, and our kind of work routines. That's what I'm talking about. And this is relevant whatever stage of life we are in. So these habits that I've adopted, as much as my life might look different now to what it did 3 years ago when, my children weren't at school, These things absolutely did play a big part. And I'm talking about habits because actually, success doesn't come from doing one thing. It comes from doing several things over time on repeat. And when we make something a habit, we do it consistently. We do it consistently, and it's not just a one and done. Oh, that kind of attitude doesn't work for me. I'm going to ditch that. We keep with it, and it's that strength of doing it regularly that has the impact. So, these habits are from my life as a mum of 4 with a husband that is not retired. I've got an aversion to exercise and I'm an action taker. I like to crack on rather than all the faff. So, I hope this is super useful. Number 1, I made the first thing that I did each day something to push my business forward. I'll repeat that again. I made the first thing that I did each day something to push my business forward. Now, when I say every day, I don't literally mean every day. I mean every day that I was going to do something in my business. Okay. And yeah, when I first adopted this was 8 years ago, and I can't take credit for this particular habit because it was suggested by a mentor that I was working with at the time, and it was a habit that worked for me so much because 8 years ago I had 3 children, 3 and under. My life was very busy, with very young children, and my time on my business was really limited because I didn't have much childcare, and that was pretty much a choice. I didn't want loads of childcare because I very much wanted to be spending the vast majority of my time mothering, and I was quite happy with bits of time, pockets of time to work on my business. So what this meant was even on days where I didn't have childcare and I didn't have much time to focus on my business, I would start the day. And by start the day, I don't necessarily mean I jumped out of bed and did this. I mean, it was early in the day. It was kind of like before we did anything as a family. I would take a moment to do one thing that would push my business forward. So often that would look like a simple post on social media. Or it might be following up past inquiries. The people that you feel like have ghosted you, but actually they've just got distracted in their life. Or it might be, tweaking something on my website. Literally, this might be something that took 10 minutes. When my children were young like that, yes, I didn't have much time on my business, but there were certainly times where I could use imperfect time to focus on it. And that might be when they were otherwise engaged watching a Peppa Pig episode, That allowing myself to take those imperfect pockets of time and to focus firstly on something to push my business forward was a game changer for me. Why is that so important? Well, because it's really easy when we do focus on our business to do the things that we have to do, and that might be answering a message from a current client. That might be replying to the message from the venue you were in talks with, you're going to do that regardless. You are not going to ghost those people. But isn't it easy to not do the things that are actually going to help you reach clients? So if you prioritize them and you make that your habit to do that work first, you are consistently taking steps to push your business forward. Now, of course, these days I do have a bit more time on my business. I absolutely do. You know, all 4 of my children are now at school. And again, I stay with that habit. When I look at my work time, I think about how I can start my work time with the things that are going to push my business forward. Not the busy work, not the distracting work, not the things that we can faff about with, the stuff that actually pushes the needle, you know, moves the needle forward. Number 2, be careful who I follow on social media. My second habit is absolutely that. I am so careful who I follow on social media. I developed this habit the hard way. You know, I was following anyone and everyone in my industry. New hypnobirthing teacher, pop up on my doorstep, click follow. You know, there's those threads in groups where people are like, let's follow each other. I'd be right on it. What happened then was when I'd go onto social media as my business to perhaps engage with followers or posts, I would be overwhelmed with everything that everybody else was saying. And that would make me second guess what I was going to post, make me sometimes feel triggered and go into scarcity mode of like, oh my gosh, there's so many other people doing this. Who am I to do it? So this is why this habit is so important. I made it a habit to unfollow, mute, remove followers, people that was really jeopardizing my limited energy for my business. You know, if there's somebody that you see their post, you think, oh, they're so inspirational, but what they're putting is triggering me because they're kind of like putting the opposite to what I put, and that makes me feel like I'm wrong. Why would you want to see that? You know? I personally do not follow any of the people that might be considered my competitors in what I do. You know, I don't follow any other hypnobirthing trainers, you know, because I don't want to be there hopping onto Instagram or hopping onto Facebook and being met with what my competition are doing at a time where I'm not in that headspace. Now, that's not to say I never look, but it's really different having that like just pop up for us. So that was one of my very important habits that is really something that I am mindful of today. So not just following people willy-nilly, really focusing on, is this beneficial to my mindset, to my business, to my energy by following this person? Our time, our energy, how we view social media is so important, and we deserve that to be protected, and we have a choice, you know? Number 3, I note down anyone who has inquired about my services. Again, this is something that I adopted a few years into my business. And before that, I just kind of like get inquiries, maybe from my emails on social media, even like via WhatsApp, and I'd like respond to those inquiries and I'd be like, oh, I'll follow them up if I don't hear anything back. Well, would I follow them up? No, because life would happen and I'd forget about it, you know? I'd forget about that person, or sometimes I'd wake up at like 2 a.m. and be like, oh, what about that woman that inquired and asked me about my course dates? Has she actually booked? Oh, who was she? Where did she message me on? Was it Instagram or was it my emails? And can you see that like level of like thinking, trawling through where it was, prevented me from actually doing the follow-ups? Now, it is said that, so many bookings for all sorts of businesses happen on the follow-up. So if we are not following up, we are missing out on a whole chunk of possible business. Now, we can't just expect to remember everything. And certainly as your business grows, you will forget who that person was, that messaged you at, 9 p.m. on a Friday evening about your course, and you replied and had a bit of a conversation about, you'll forget. But if you note it down, you will have that place to remind yourself. So I got in the habit of always, and literally for me, because I like to keep things simple, I like to keep things usable. I'm sure there's more techie ways of doing this, but literally I have an iPhone, and on my iPhone there's a section called notes. I have a note saying inquiries, and I would just write a list, so I would just jot down Sarah Smith, 20th of September, inquired about doing my hypnobirthing teacher training. Okay, she is worried about. Okay, I'd reply to her in the moment, but then I'd know that I had this list to go back over and see what happened there. Okay, super useful habit, because that meant, that very quickly I can visit who I can follow up, rather than needing to trawl through messages or rely on memory. Okay. Number 4, keeping my business money and my personal money separate. Not something I did at first. Not something that I did for a good few years, actually. And, I suppose I'm a little bit ashamed to admit that literally, like when someone booked my hypnobirthing course, when I solely taught hypnobirthing, I would literally give them my personal bank details, the same bank that my bills would come out of from my home life, the same bank that I would buy stuff from the shops with. It was all in one place. Okay. Goodness, I separated that, because having this habit of seeing things as business money and my money made me view things really differently in my business. What it meant was, when I was considering making an investment in my business, and that investment might be something as simple as upgrading to Canva Pro for this amount a month, or even it could be paying for someone to do a few little jobs in my business. I wasn't seeing that. I was like, oh, is that, a coffee with my kids or Canva Pro? Because in reality, we're not doing that. This is separate. It's totally separate. But when we see it as that way, we can be really reluctant to actually invest in the things that are the needle movers, because we're almost like seeing it as money taken away from our everyday lives. Now, I'm also really grateful that this became a habit, that I saw my finances separate, as ultimately, oh my God, it just made things so much simpler. So much simpler to see what was going in and what was going out. And I will put my hands up and say, as much as I love running a business, I do not love the admin side of it, the kind of figures side of it. I do not love that kind of stuff. I do not geek out on that kind of stuff at all. I am someone who can quite happily ignore things too long. But having it separate, not just the act of having it separate, viewing it separate, really helped me take my business seriously. Not seeing it as a hobby, if our hobby was knitting, we would be buying wool out of our personal bank account. It would very much seem as an alternative to buying a coffee in Starbucks. Your business is not that. Your business is something that is generating you income to give to yourself, you know? And there are always going to be outgoings. But when we don't see it that way, my gosh, we can sometimes totally limit ourselves because we are not allowing ourselves to make investments that will actually help us generate more money long term. So that's absolutely a key habit. Now, this leads me on to habit number 5 that has been so important in my business, and it really relates to the previous one. Number 5 is I started talking about my business as a big deal. I stopped saying things like, oh, my little business, you know? Oh, I need a little bit of time to work on my little business. If you want to support my little business, this is what you should do. If I'm calling my business a little business, what are other people going to view my business as? Something not important, something that is just a hobby, something that is bottom of the list of priorities. How could the people in my life respect my need to work on my business when I'm talking about it like that? So getting into the habit of talking about my business as it actually is, as equal to employment, massively helped me take it seriously, and really importantly, those around me in my life. So, I really hope you have enjoyed this episode. Totally not about habits like jumping in ice baths or what to eat on a morning or anything like that, but are about the way that we view our business, the things that we do that stick and long term lead to big impact. Now, I'd love to hear what your number 1 key takeaway has been from this episode. So do come along to my Instagram page at loveyourbirth_training. Send me a DM and let me know what your key takeaway has been. And I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye. Thank you for listening to Rockabye Revenue. I hope this episode has left you with some fresh ideas and bundles of motivation. If you enjoyed this episode, do make sure you click subscribe so you never miss an installment. And if you found this episode useful, I'd love you forever if you leave a 5-star review, helping this podcast reach the ears of more of the helpers in this world. And remember, keep changing lives. See you next time.